Welcome to Identiverse 2025. I am here with CyberRiskTV, Adrian Sanabria, here with Jackie.
Yay!
How you doing, Jackie?
I'm fantastic. I'm happy to be here. It's very unusual we get to see each other in person, so it's awesome to be here.
I usually have a script for these things, so at least something I will panic and forget, and it was McGuire.
McGuire.
Jackie McGuire.
Yeah, that's all right. I was a McGuinness before I was a McGuire, so half of the people I know didn't notice when I changed my name, so it's okay.
Ooh. All right, it's something I need to get more used to doing. I use a script for a lot of things. I don't think I need to as much, but I'm kind of dependent on it, so it's good practice.
I mispronounced my own last name when I hosted a conference a couple months ago.
That's amazing.
It was really, really embarrassing. I was like, I'm Jackie, and I dropped an F-bomb, and the CEO I was interviewing thought we were live, and he had a heart attack.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So tune in for more hot takes, because there's bound to be a few this week.
Nice. Well, this so Identiverse 2025. This is my first. It is an identity-focused conference, and I think the last kind of niche market-specific conference I had been to was, we were talking about reInvent earlier, AWS reInvent, and the last one of those I went to was maybe 2017. So it's really, well, I guess Zero Trust World, but that was a vendor conference, so it's a little bit different. Whereas this is not run by a vendor, right? It's run by CRA, but CRA doesn't sell security products. So we're here at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center and getting flashbacks. I don't think I've been here since before the pandemic. I don't think I've been to a Black Hat since the pandemic.
Yeah, I think I've been to everyone since the pandemic. I have actually met some of my best friends and the people I hang out with the most, which is saying something, because I don't have friends. At least friends I hang out with. I think friends. I have friends, but I think like most neurospicy people, I only actually hang out with like 3 people that I'm not related to. So, but yeah, like Black Hat I find is always one of the between Black Hat and DEF CON, there's always fun to be had. So I'm trying to think if I've been to the Mandalay since last year, though. I don't think so.
Yeah, it was a little depressing how familiar everything was. It's a testament to how many times I've been here in the past, but I didn't need any directions. From when the Uber dropped me off, I knew exactly where to go. I knew where everything was, down to the FedEx office in the convention center to pick up my package. And yeah, it's I mean, familiar in a good way too.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of nice to be somewhere familiar where you know how to get around, and this will not be the only time either of us will be here at the Mandalay this year.
No. I almost feel like I live in Vegas part-time. Like, I'm wondering how many days a year you have to work in a town.
At least you're close.
Yeah. I'm in Tucson, so it's a quick flight. But yeah, same thing. I get here, I know exactly how the airport's laid out. I know where I need to go. I know which restaurants I like and don't like. I know which clubs I can get into. Like, it's I never, if you had asked me in my early 20s if there would be a point in which I felt like I was like an old school Vegas resident, I would not have predicted that, but cybersecurity has brought that wonderful. And what is it about Vegas that cybersecurity people like? And because I've always wondered this, right? Because I would say probably half of the cybersecurity conferences, the large ones, are in Vegas. Is it the ability to be anonymous? Is it that you can just kind of disappear into big crowds? Is it there's all kinds of different types of entertainment? Like, what do you think it is about Vegas that brings security people here?
Well, I don't know if it's just that, the price of putting on a conference here ends up putting a lot of the conferences here in the availability of conference space. Like AWS and reInvent, that was the Sands Convention Center is the second largest convention center in the world. So just the scale of everything, the fact that it's easy to put stuff on here, but a lot of us are on kind of that autism scale somewhere, right? And there's a lot of flashy things, there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of gadgets, a lot of technology here. So maybe there's the shiny.
We just want to cut loose.
Yeah, there's always some new show. There's always some new, especially today. I noticed not today, but in recent years, there's more and more like technology focused, like almost not quite museums. I don't know what to call them, but experiences you can go walk around in. So maybe that, and I know I in the past, I think I've been to one show in the 40, 50 times I've been to Vegas. But I know a lot of people who go that kind of stuff every time. But for me, I'm just, after the event, I'm in my hotel room just staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
Just, chilling out.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. I'll get back to my hotel room, and all of a sudden I'll realize it's been like 90 minutes, and I've literally been sitting on the end of the bed with my shoes still on, just staring at the floor.
Yeah.
Contemplating my existence and how I'm going to people again in 8 hours. And like, I literally haven't checked my phone yet. And sometimes it's a good hour and a half that I do that, because I think I'm a very extroverted introvert, and so I have these like spurts of being manic and being able to people really hard, and then I get back to my hotel and I'm like, why did I do that? What did I do? So conferences are always fun for that reason. But yeah, Identiverse, I think we were talking earlier about identity in general and kind of what to talk about here, and I think it's really exciting for me to be, I had an option of whether I wanted to come to Identiverse or not, and I chose to come because identity is kind of the new front of security war, right? I think there's somebody said to me the other day, like 100% of compromises involve some type of identity, right? You don't compromise things without an account to log in through. And I think we're in this really weird transition period for identity, where historically we've had machine identities and human identities, right? And very clear delineation between the two. And now somebody just came in and threw a AI-powered hand grenade into that. So I'm actually really excited to go to some of the sessions and see some of the more cutting-edge stuff. We've got a really exciting interview with Tina from Badge, who's doing some really cool stuff with biometric identification. And so I think on the nerd side, I'm pretty excited. I'm going to drain my social battery, but hopefully also fill up my intellectual battery.
Right. Yeah, it really does. Going to one of these events changes, like all the interviews we have for the rest of the year will be impacted by what we learned at this event. I've noticed that with each event I go to after Zero Trust World, my brain was still digesting that weeks later and incorporating it into other conversations. So I want to talk a little bit. First of all, Identiverse is 16 years old now, and it's a 4-day conference, over 250 speakers, over 3,000 attendees, and over 200 vendors in the expo, which the folks watching this cannot see, but it's directly behind us. We're at one of the corners of the expo, and it's a decent sized expo. It's no RSA, but over 200 vendors here, and it is part of CyberRisk Alliance. So as you can tell on the wall behind me, I think CRA bought it maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if I recall correctly, and it's one of the many events that CRA now owns, along with InfoSec World and a few others.
We'll also be doing that one later this year. That's exciting.
Yeah, in Orlando.
Yeah,
that one does not move around. I think this one does, because I recall Identiverse, I think, was in Denver last year.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm excited for next year.
Yeah. I don't know if they intend to move around or if this is a more permanent move, but I do remember Identiverse being in a couple different cities.
Nice.
So something that happened today, so I mentioned 4 days, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Our busy day is going to be tomorrow. We're going to be streaming live almost all day tomorrow, Pacific time. So it'll start a little bit earlier for folks on the East Coast. But today was workshop day. Had a whole bunch of workshops today. There was a non-human identity workshop. And I found the workshops kind of outline the major topic areas for the conference, or some of them at least. Non-human identity, as you said, with machine identity, it's nothing new, but it's expanding so much. There's with MCP and AI plugging into different things, APIs and all the tokens you need for all the things to talk to each other behind the scenes without a human present is going to ramp up quite a bit. AI and identity, the big question of how do we an AI agent, like how do we think about it? How do we secure it? Because the more we narrow its access to things, the less useful it becomes. So do we treat it like a human identity or a machine identity, or is it an entirely new thing? So I'm going to be interested to see more about that. But that's one of the workshops that happened this morning. Continuous identity, which we heard about a lot at Zero Trust World, actually, because just the idea of if I steal your Slack token and I'm suddenly logged in as you, we want to be checking to see something went wrong with behavior. All of a sudden, this account that was acting normally is downloading, a billion files all at once. It's, mass exfiltration of data. All kinds of different triggers we want to look at to maybe force a re-authentication, or, somebody needs to do something sensitive, like change somebody's salary. Like, there should be an extra check there.
Yeah.
And then personal identity, which I think is interesting. They had a workshop on personal identity, and I'm going to have so many acronyms and things to learn here. There's things like with continuous identity, CAEP, RISK, which I think of as reduced instruction sets for chips, but I'm sure that's not what that means, RISC, and shared signals. I think I've seen shared signals before, but again, I think that goes to, okay, something weird's going on with this account, that kind of thing.
Like a user identity behavior analytics type.
And then with personal identity, there's self-sovereign identity, which is SSI. Not familiar with that acronym. MDocs, not sure what that is. Verifiable credentials, I guess they're talking about identity verification, which it's interesting that organizations and even governments are depending on people's personal devices to do identity verification, because we happen to have these things that can do a decent job of saying, yes, that's a live human face and not a photo of that person, to prevent identity fraud. So I think that's pretty interesting. Interested to learn more about that. I was kind of surprised to see personal identity as one of the big 4 workshops.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm surprised and I'm not surprised, because it's one of the things that you probably struggle with as well. So I also am
as a contractor.
I have 10 jobs, right? And I have
Do you have a separate laptop for each? You have separate credentials?
Hell no.
No, neither of us do. Yeah.
So, I just have a lot of freaking Chrome profiles. Yeah. And I will say I do carry a separate mobile
I have
device.
separate Chrome profiles. Yeah.
So I have chosen, I've always had a work phone. I've always wanted a work phone. So I do carry a separate mobile just for my work accounts, and I don't have any crossover accounts between the 2 devices. And that has actually been more to protect the organizations I work for than myself, just because I do all kinds of crazy shit on my personal phone. But I think, I worry about 404 Media has a podcast, right? I think we both listen to it, and they have a couple services that they promote that are personal identity management
delete
services.
me, that kind of stuff.
And so I've started thinking about that more and more, both in the aspect of, if I do something and my identity's compromised, what do I do? And, what liability do I have if that in turn impacts one of the organizations I contract for? And so, what should I be doing personally other than having an endpoint detection on my laptop? And, for mobile devices, unless you're working for an actual enterprise, the number of solutions available aren't super awesome. I've really been trying to find something more effective, and I just don't think there's a lot of great options out there. So I think we do probably as individuals need to start focusing more on our personal identity security, just because of smart devices, our fates are kind of tied to our employers. So either
that line is totally gray now.
Either a compromise on your employer could compromise information on your device, or vice versa. So it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I blame 404 for it, because they're always advertising forget me. But And then finally there was a SANS was here doing an executive cyber exercise workshop, which sounds like a big tabletop exercise, basically. Step into the role of a crisis management team. So that sounds like it was probably pretty interesting. For a bunch of executives to be in that room, and
they're actually screening who could join that that workshop because they specifically just want security leaders in there. So,
I do think, like, leading the response to an incident is a significant, like, as an executive, is a significantly different responsibility than even like the head of security or the head of incident response, right? Mm-hmm. Because that includes crisis management, communications, people management. Like, there's, as a CISO, I imagine there's the amount of things that you have to be watching while also trying to deal with security posture is enormous, and figuring out when to tell which executives and who to wake up in the middle of the night and who not to.
Well, a lot of it's just preparation. It's so that you don't have to think super hard about that stuff. When you've trained for it, you've prepared for it, you got a playbook ready, you just open up that playbook and go, and you're not having to make it up as you go.
Yeah.
Though, I mean, certain personality types thrive on that kind of stress and adrenaline, those types of instances.
And not all security leaders come from the same background. So red teaming and blue teaming and doing, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago on one of our episodes.
They're non-technical CISOs out there.
Yeah, and so their willingness to, divert resources to do some type of, incident simulation, catastrophic incident simulation, resilience, things like that, is low. And I think it's something that more outside of security executives should be aware of, is this is something your security executive should be doing. Yeah. And it may not necessarily be intuitive to you that, yes, we actually do need to simulate, we completely lose cloud connectivity. We do need to simulate, all of our storage is encrypted.
And you can tell the companies that didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
Because it's a hot mess. You know, they try and deny it, they try and hide it, they just all these things that you would know if you've ever studied anybody else having a breach, if you've done tabletops. There's just so many things that become obvious to the public when you're dealing with that event for the first time with no plan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for today's opener. We do not have one for tomorrow. So I want to mention most of the big keynotes are going to be tomorrow. We've got John Pritchard, CEO of Radiant Logic. Ready Player 2 is the name of his keynote. Why multiplayer AI beats going solo in identity security. Hannah Rudder, the Deputy Director, Digital Identity for the UK government. Establishing trust through standards, governance, and legislation. And it looks like, no, I don't think that's a panel, it's just her. And then the third one tomorrow morning, building world-class teams, how to achieve breakthrough performance through collaboration, creativity, and a culture of one. Robin Benincasa, world champion adventure racer, firefighter, and keynote speaker. So, we got some interesting stuff tomorrow morning. That's it from us for right now. We'll have some interviews coming up later today. We've got just 2 today before we sign off. And you can check out all the coverage at securityweekly.com/IDV. Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRiskTV Studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Convention Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today for this interview is Chip Hughes.
Hey.
How are you doing, Chip?
I'm great. Happy to be here. It's already looking like it's going to be a great week, so it's exciting.
Yeah, I think they're still putting together booths and stuff like that. So it's an interesting conference. We've already had some workshops today.
Yeah.
We've got keynotes tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be the big day, though.
It's awesome. It always feels like Old Homes Day in some ways, too. You just walk through and see a lot of people have known for a long time, so it's always great to be here. It's exciting.
And you are the Chief Product Officer at Imprivata.
That's right, for about a year. It'll be a year this month, so exciting times. Been in the space for a while, and Imprivata's been a great place to be and excited about what we're doing. So,
love talking about product. You've got several product lines, but most excitingly, you get to play in a lot of spaces that are really messy, like the stuff that's really fun to talk about. Maybe not for the people doing security in those environments, but I love talking about this because there's just a lot of chatter in the industry about, if only we just did this. You know, you sprinkled some AI on this or did something over it. And then you pull out, well, what about hospitals?
Yep.
What about manufacturing? What about retail?
Yep.
What about all these occasions where you can't put in extra friction, or you can't force people to type a 32 character password or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun. We are primarily in Imprivata. We're in 90% plus of the hospital systems here in North America. We're a global company.
90%.
That plus. I mean, lot of hospital penetration. And you think about the criticality of care and the nurses, the clinicians, the doctors that have to be able to go through. They want to be able to see as many patients as possible to provide that care. We've got real issues in terms of shortages, making that experience for those doctors, those clinicians as seamless as possible. And those things apply in other areas too. You know, we have airline pilots that have to be able to go, they have to carry iPads on their planes. How do you solve these challenges where you have shared devices, shared infrastructure, but you need to be able to give that seamless, quick experience that's secure? And that balance has always been a real challenge, and we're trying to eliminate that decision and make it really easy for our customers to just provide that care, have seamless access. And when you get into that shared world, it's a lot of fun. And particularly if we're talking healthcare, a lot of old stuff and a lot of new stuff, so you're balancing a lot of different pieces of infrastructure and apps and integration and those sorts of things.
And I'm not sure how much the average person knows about how healthcare works, but like in large hospitals, most doctors are not employees of the hospital, right? They're contractors.
They can travel. You have lots of different situations.
They bring in their own devices. They connect them to the network.
That can be true too. So, and it's interesting, especially I think of nurses a lot and how we deal with nurses. So you have traveling nurses that can come in.
Right.
You have nurses that are obviously hospital employees. And so most people have heard of Epic as one of the major healthcare, back-end systems that we provide. When we're thinking about Epic, they want customers to move to start using their mobile applications as the way that they go provide care. And it's interesting, if I'm a hospital and I have to provide a mobile device to all of my employees, what does that look like? You've got doctors often want to use their own. You've got nurses may or may not be able to use their own. So we have union laws that sometimes prevent it. We don't want.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We have PHI data we don't want to have leaving the hospital potentially.
Right.
And so it's been really interesting for me as I've been on this journey looking through how can we deal with this shared set of ecosystem, shared mobile devices, do assignments that work. And even if you think nursing, beyond nursing, we also have things like EVS staff, the people who go clean up the hospitals. You have other folks that are doing IT operations. So it costs hospital systems a whole lot of money. And one of the things we're really focused on is how can we provide secure access in a cost-efficient way so you don't have to go necessarily buy a phone for every single user and deal with, I left my phone at home, those type of things, so that nurses, doctors, that type of staff can still provide that access. And so you get into these challenges, you need to have passwordless authentication, you need to have seamless experiences, and it fits right into that identity paradigm, but it is sort of its own sliver within that world, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting when Mark Andreessen did his whole software's eating the world thing, I think was 2013, 2012, something like that.
Yeah.
Like he revisited that 10 years later and judged himself on it. He said, I think I was largely correct except for healthcare. And it's interesting, we are now seeing healthcare kind of come up into complete some of that digital transformation. And I wonder, when you go into environments, so it sounds like for a lot of it, you're not just selling a product or a service. Like you have to help them architect and engineer what the workflow is going to look like, how the employee is going to use it. You have to think about all this stuff actively. You can't just, okay, here's your licenses, go have fun.
Nope, that's right. And so it's been interesting. At Imprivata, we actually have a chief medical officer.
Yeah.
We have a chief nursing officer, and part of what they do is they help design workflow. They go to our customers and they'll do walkthroughs and say, here's where we can optimize our solution. And as we look at getting into other verticals, because we are in the commercial space, we're in manufacturing, we're in these other things, we do look at, do we need to bring somebody in that is a specific specialist where we can work through these sort of non-desk workers and make sure we're giving that optimal solution. And so it's something we really focus on. But I first joined the organization and I went, chief medical officer. It's a guy named Sean Kelly.
Yeah.
Great guy. What is this? And then you sort of start working with it, like, oh, I get it. It's really important you understand how these things work to sort of solve their problems at scale.
Yeah, I imagine in a lot of those organizations, maybe they've heard some pitches before and they're like, it's not going to work. We've tried that. So you need that kind of credibility on staff where somebody said, no, it can work. And, here's some customer case studies. We've done it over here. That's how we know it can work, right?
That's right. It's case studies. It's having the people that do it day to day. It's for us, doctors, pharmacists, those sorts of things on staff where we can go in and build that credibility. And it's been interesting too. Healthcare. I spent a lot of time in other verticals doing other things. The quality of our product and the expectation when you're dealing with people and delivering healthcare is just second to none, right? Some software companies sometimes have some bugs. That's kind of acceptable depending. You have one issue where one patient record has been compromised. It is truly a huge deal across us from a company perspective. And so what that really drives is we've got to give that productivity. We want our doctors and our nurses to be able to deliver quality care, to see as many patients as possible, to when they get home, they talk about pajama time. I'm putting my notes in that medical record system. We want to be able to provide that seamless access, but our solution also has to be secure. So if that doctor is badging in, badging out, and putting those notes in, it has to be for the record of the appropriate patient.
Right.
Because if it's not, right, it's really a problem. We're really focused on...
We don't want the wrong organs getting taken out.
I would say it's not this leg, not this leg, right? But what it drives for us is how do we provide that really efficient access, but also security is a big deal, right? Ransomware, if you go talk to a CISO at a hospital system, they'll talk to you about ransomware for hours and hours and hours. And so you're dealing with legacy stuff. You got to have seamless passwordless access and figure out how to solve those challenges. We've been doing it for a long time.
I love you mentioned pajama time because you have to understand that culture and part of this job is gonna same thing in education with teachers. Like a lot of their job has to happen quiet times on the weekends.
That's right.
In the evenings. There is no time in the building at the school to get this kind of stuff done.
That's right.
So they got to take work home with them, and you have to deal with that from an identity perspective.
And that's where part of our strategy is. We want to solve that clinical use case where we bring in our team, really understand that, but we also want to be able an identity and access management company that can extend to how do we do remote access most appropriately, more commonly that we've seen. How can we solve some of these knowledge worker problems so we can use the same set of tools from a platform perspective to deliver that seamless experience. So it's been a fun journey, and a lot of what we're doing, we're driving a lot of innovation, so it's been a lot of fun.
There's a marketing opportunity there with pajama time. There's something there.
Well, we have it's
stickers.
Great.
I'm not sure what it is, but
we talk about the cognitive piece and giving people breaks on that front too, right? Because you think about doctors, you're thinking all the time, and how do we give you a break?
Switching.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So it's important to us.
Yeah, you can only switch so many times before you get burned out, and you get slow. You start making mistakes. Yeah. So, two things I want to cover before we have to wrap up the conversation here. What do these environments generally look like when you get in? Is it that they're secure, but things are not convenient? There is a lot of friction, or there's just not a lot of friction because it's insecure. So, so I want to talk about that, and then I want to talk about what the ideal environment looks like what it looks like when you're done with it.
Yeah.
If you can get it done the way that you want to.
So it's a couple different things. So, we're privileged to have a really large customer base, which is great. A lot of our customers are using our, what we call tap and go solution. So I've got the badge, I walk up to an endpoint, so that could be a desktop, maybe next to a bed. That could be if I'm walking into a manufacturing floor, I need to clock in, clock out. Great, tap the badge, I'm logged in. Usually the first time we do that, we want the user to have some sort of second factor for authentication. So they'll put in something like a password. And what we do, we then sort of unlock a trusted period of time where we'll let you then walk around and just use your badge. So use multi-factor once, and then you're in what we call a grace period. And that doctor or that nurse or clinical provider can walk over and just tap in, tap out, and we trust the badge at that point. And that works great, but you get into some of these awkward conversations about, well, how long should that period of time be?
Right.
When do I need to step up? Do I have this concept of risk? Is a doctor or nurse accessing something they haven't accessed before? Those type of things. And so what we're building is more seamless ways to add a second factor of authentication on top of that. So we've been very focused on facial. So can I now have a doctor walk in or a nurse walk in, tap a badge, use a face as a second factor? All of that's passwordless, right? We still see this challenge where there is legacy stuff, like I said, that exists in these hospital systems. It's just going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm going from a 15-character password to a 32-character password.
Imagine you've got some pin codes on a Chronos or something
and people are posting. It just doesn't work. I'll share another story about our mobile solution in a second. But so we want to get to a place where we can make that really seamless, and we're thinking about, push notifications to phone. Where can I use face? And part of what we're building is we want this passwordless experience to be able to work with you across all of your functions. So I work at home, we were talking about, I'm on a personal PC, I want to be able to use that face in whatever factor we want. I'm going in, tapping, use face. I'm going in and checking out a phone, tapping, use face, or whatever authenticators we want. And so that's sort of the ultimate end state. We talked a little bit about mobile. We want to be able to go check in and check out these mobile devices. Yeah. And when we go through,
I've seen these carts where you have like dozens of mobile devices.
We do.
And they all plug in and they charge, and you just grab one off the cart, right?
It's a very cool experience. Yeah. So you walk up, you tap your badge. And I've seen too, you have this problem. Before we let you use that badge tap, we do want you to use that password one time. Yeah. Well, if I'm doing it on a mobile device and it's 16 characters, that's not great. So that idea of portable sort of facial authentication following you solves a lot of those challenges, right? We would have 2 lines, one to log in that first time and then one to go get your mobile device. So it's optimizing that experience, whether it's healthcare or another use case, using passwordless and driving that, and helping our customers understand how to adopt those technologies, and starting with the most valuable things either from a user or a risk perspective. And then the other piece, like I said, is layering in other components to start looking at risk. Mm-hmm. So what is normal for a user, very specific clinical UEBA, and then more classic what we see from a market perspective, things like, does this look like a known attack, known attack pattern, those type of things, and layering that into our tool as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and it's interesting hearing about UEBA. I remember it was big, like 2012, we were talking about, all the SIM vendors were talking about it, and it was just maybe more than we could handle at that point, or we went through, I like to say there's not a lot of really bad ideas in security. Yeah. There's just poorly executed.
I agree. For us, one of the things we're focused on is we have unique data sets in terms of we can look at our clinical providers, we can look at users, understand what they're logging into with their badges, and we can start comparing that just for what's a normal pattern. When does this user actually badge into this set of workstations? We can tie that back to hospital departments as an example. All of a sudden, if I'm Chip at a different department than I usually am, we want to be able to detect that. And then we have some cool...
Surgeons shouldn't be going into the boiler room in the basement.
That's right. And we have some other things around patient privacy type data. So I'm Chip, maybe I tap in, I'm trying to access, some famous actress's record. Maybe we need to go identify that quickly. So we have all of those pieces in place now to really help both with compliance and driving just better security and better privacy for our patients, which is great.
Yeah, and I imagine if you can get it right at a hospital, that's such a challenge. It has to be a public area, right? So you're down to room by room, like security at that level. I think it really is one of the more challenging ones from both a physical and digital perspective.
The thing that I think is cool is actually walking away. The logging in some respects, is the easier part.
Yeah.
It's how do you deal with people walking away? Not everyone's always going to remember that they have to badge out. They may just want to walk away from a machine. And we talk a lot about hospitals of the future, sort of, all these other pieces of the future. And just this idea that we can inherently build that with what we're doing based on face. Care at home. How do I tie a doctor back to an inpatient and providing care at home and doing authentication on that? And so it's a really cool future in terms of what
in a way that where people don't freak out about privacy.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's interesting. Different generations have different views, and that's part of this too. Is what are people willing to accept, and how does that work? And so we're working through all those pieces.
Great stuff. Thanks again for joining me today, Chip.
Awesome.
I enjoyed the conversation. In just 15 minutes we've been talking, already learned a bunch of things.
Cool.
Which I love.
It's great. So it's great. Great to be here. Thanks.
To find out more about Imprivata, please visit securityweekly.com/Imprivata IDV. For all Identiverse 2025 coverage by CyberRisk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/IDV. And thanks again, Chip.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome.
Have a good conference.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Yeah. Thanks.
Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRiskTV Studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Ashley Stevenson, VP of Product and Solutions Marketing at DigiCert. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Adrian.
Yeah, great to have you here. We just opened the expo floor. We've got food, we've got drinks, everybody's come in. We got the show started.
You can feel the energy out there. I think there's around 3,000 people here and everybody's out.
Yep, over 3,000 people, I think. So yeah, this is identity is very interesting to me. I've not been to a lot of conferences that weren't general topic, like the larger Black Hat and RSA. And coming to learn, like there's a whole acronym soup I'm not even familiar with.
Yes.
And I've been in security since 2001. And I feel like I'm behind on identity, so I'm learning a lot here. What we're talking about today, I'm a little bit more familiar with. So for people that don't know DigiCert, let's just start there.
Yep.
I think people have probably heard of DigiCert in terms of the certificate business. Tell me a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, so DigiCert is a leader in global trust. But what does that mean in the real world, right? So let's go through some scenarios. If you're on your computer in your browser and you're trying to load up your bank app or your bank website because you want to make a transfer, first question is, how do you know that what's rendering in your browser is actually coming from the website that is the server from your bank and not from a rogue server that's delivering something to try to capture your credentials to go steal your identity?
Yeah.
When you think of software, how do you know that a software update that's pushed to your iPhone or a software update or a firmware update that is pushed to a medical device, how do you know that that software is trusted, hasn't been tampered with, hasn't had malware injected? Today, when you look at content, how do you know that that content didn't come from an AI? It wasn't AI generated, it wasn't a deep fake, that it was actually came from the person or the organization that you think it came from. And so, digital trust is how we solve all of these things. And we do that from a technology perspective. We do that with asymmetric cryptography. And that's the public-private key pairs that actually support that. Now, those key pairs are a part of a broader public key infrastructure, or PKI, there's an acronym that we're probably all familiar with, right? Yep. And so those work with PKI. And then parts of the crypto, along with parts of identity attributes of a server or a person and other policy pieces of information, then go onto a certificate, onto a PKI certificate. And then that certificate is installed in a web server or on a laptop for, connecting to VPN, what have you. And so once all of that's done, then you need to manage all of these certificates because you're going to have hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of these certificates. So management of that across the ecosystem is also something that we do for our customers, which are 80% of the Fortune 500, our DigiCert customers. Now, as far as preparing for the future, I just came out
80%?
80%, wow. Yeah. Okay. I just came back from some of the keynotes out there where they're talking about, and I already see a theme of like agentic AI or agents doing everything on our behalf. Friendly worker bots, right?
Yeah. Those are going to need,
exactly.
How are they going to connect?
So going back to the how questions, how are we going to trust an agent that's working on our behalf to know that it comes from a trusted place and that it's going to do what we want and that we can shut it down if we need to? And these technologies help solve those problems now for things like load balancers and web servers, and also in the future for agentic AI bots and all different types of connected devices.
Yeah, it's you and me are obviously old enough to remember a time when the internet was not all HTTPS, when the web was not all HTTPS. And shockingly, I think recently I went back and looked, that only happened in 2014 that we really got the vast majority. And I think it was finally Google saying, you know what? Yeah. Your search rank is going to suck if you're not defaulting to HTTPS.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it's only been 10 years, but I think there's a whole generation that's never heard, look for the green lock icon, right?
Yeah.
So it's all invisible to them.
Just assume, right?
Until someone forgets to renew a cert and you get that warning page, right?
That's right.
It says this page is not secure.
And that browser makes it very difficult.
You got to hunt for some buttons to show it anyway, right?
That's right.
So it becomes very visible when it fails.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we do to help prevent outages, because certificates are issued, right, and they have a time frame for when they'll expire.
Yeah.
And so As opposed to many identity and access management things of the world, access might be provisioned and then it's out there until it's deprovisioned, or you have to check on it and attest and recertify you still need access. When it comes to a PKI certificate, it has an expiration date.
Yeah.
And if that date is past due, whatever that thing is doing is going to stop working, right? So a couple of months ago, I think there was a Chromecast outage all across Chromecast.
I remember that.
That was an expired certificate. A couple of years ago, there was, or a year and a half, yeah, go ahead.
And some of the problem there is people are like, was it intentional? Are they shutting down the product? Because they're no longer making Chromecast products. They quit making them. So we knew it was discontinued. They weren't going to sell new ones. But that can very easily be misconstrued by your customers, right?
Could be.
You know, I've seen a lot of these just honest failures, like somebody was supposed to replace the certificate and didn't. All of a sudden, their customers are moving to competitors. They think the company's shutting down their services. And too late, the company's like, whoa, wait.
Yeah. Outages can cause major problems, either punitive financial or financial problems, relationship with your customers, your brand reputation, all of those things. In fact, a year and a half or two, Skylink, Elon Musk's satellite system was down, and he tweeted, sorry about that, it was an expired cert on a base station, right?
Yeah.
So what do we have to do to address this? So we're here at Identiverse. The world of identity and access management deals with identity management, right? It's the management of the identities. The access management is the runtime piece. So we have to do management of all of our PKI certificates in the same way. Identity calls it identity lifecycle management. In the PKI world, it's sometimes called certificate lifecycle management, but it's the lifecycle management, and automation is a big part of that. But before we even get to automation, we've got to discover everything that we have in our enterprise, take a massive inventory, get a central database. From there, we need to be able to assign owners distributed of who owns all the different pieces of PKI, right? And set up notifications so that if something's going to expire, they get a notification on a Slack or a text or whatever before it expires. So this is part of certificate lifecycle management that we offer in our platform. And then you get to the automation, and there's two main pieces of that. The first piece is I need to reach out to my certificate authority and renew 100 or 100,000 certificates and get them in my hands. But the second piece, which is harder, is I need to be able to then provision those certificates to do the jobs they need to do on the web servers, on the computers, on the load balancers, to the agents of
they're
AI.
not all web servers, right?
That's
like a lot of things need certificates deployed to them.
The software, for signing software, I need to deploy that so the people who are compiling software can sign with something that is current and eventually quantum safe. So all that automation has to take place and get out there. And when that happens, it's going to prepare. We're doing that because we need to prepare our customers in the world for all the change that's coming to PKI, which is shorter certificate life cycles and the threat of quantum computing.
Yeah, and those shorter certificate life cycles. I'm proofreading a book for someone right now, and there is a mention in there that I flagged where he talks about certificates having 1 year life. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's been true for a while now.
Right now, they're just over a year.
Yeah.
Typically, for a public trust certificate that you would think of for a website, right?
Okay, I thought we'd moved to 90 days already.
No, not by what's required from the CA browser form, right? And so they are on their way to, by 2029, March of 2029, it's going to be 47 days.
47 days.
And between now and then, it's going to step down over the years until it gets to there. Yeah, month and a half. Now, here's the interesting thing. The certificate life cycle will be 47 days. But there's a thing with DNS, and this is one of the things that we just recently launched. DNS itself, if you think about it, and for your audience, who may have heard of it but don't know exactly, think of your phone and your contacts. When you're going to call someone, you look up someone by name, and that's associated to a phone number because we don't remember
phone numbers anymore.
If I left my phone in an Uber, there's probably 2 numbers I could remember, right?
Yeah.
And so DNS is that at its beginning stage. It is the ability to map a name to an IP address, right? Yeah. But DNS does so much more. 2 other really important things is it is part of what does distributed denial of service attack blocking and preventing.
Yeah.
It also routes a huge percentage of the traffic around the internet based on where it's trying to go and help it get there. But here's the thing, there's a really important connection between DNS and PKI.
Okay.
So we know that PKI, we talked about PKI and how it develops that trust of all those things. Now DNS has 2 things, as a name and an address. That name is also an attribute in that certificate, which is a very important piece of the certificate of the host name or the software, whatever it is, right? And so there has to be trust between those two. And the way that that trust is established is that the certificate authority reaches out and says, hey, prove to me that, adrianshow.com belongs to you. Prove to me you own that domain.
Yeah.
So you have to reach out and update a record there, and the CA sees it and says, okay, you're validated for another year. So there's actually two different timelines there taking place: the validity of the certificate and the validity of the validation. They call it domain control validation.
Yeah.
Prove to me that you control that domain. Because if somebody goes in and changes that address, going back to the very first sign of, do I know that that website is actually my bank's? If they can change that address and I hit that name and it goes to the rogue site, going back to before HTTPS, if it wasn't, right? So there's issues there. So all that to say, the DNS validity of DNS verification, when it gets to 47 days for a certificate, is going to be 10 days for DNS. And so, and so to update to do that domain validation, right? And the reason for this is all about security. Right. Because the longer a certificate's out there, the more surface area it has for attack. Parts of the revocation pieces of PKI don't work the way that they should. They have privacy issues, they have other issues, and scalability. So the forums are saying, the authorities, if you will, are saying, we're going to shorten that cycle and spin that wheel a lot faster for having to renew.
Well, I think one of the other benefits we're going to see is people are going to be forced to automate it, to fully automate this.
That's right.
It's going to get people still doing it manually. That results in these situations where stuff goes down because somebody forgot to do it, or it wasn't on their schedule, or the stuff that humans aren't good at, right?
That's right.
I think it will finally force everyone to realize, okay, this just needs to be fully automated, and we're going to need a system to do that. And I presume that's what the one platform does. Earlier you were talking about having a system to gather and analyze everything that's in the environment and then manage that that life cycle, right? That certificate life cycle.
So the DigiCert One platform does that, and now with this new announcement, this new launch, it does it for PKI and DNS together. You may be surprised, your audience may be surprised to learn that a lot of these steps today for organizations are manual. Like there's literally a PKI team and a DNS team, and at the highest level, they're sending tickets to each other to manually update records, right?
Yeah.
And then at the next level of maturity, they're using kind of an API where tokens are spread all over the place, and there's no fine-grained authorization. And so, if an attacker were to get a hold of that API key, can come over and update anything they want in DNS, which would be bad.
Yeah.
So what we announced and what we're doing with the PKI plus DNS is saying we have all that granular authorization, it's native on the same platform, it's simplified, and we're automatically doing all that updates. So you can automatically update your PKI certificates and your domain validation at the same time. The PKI certificates, a lot of people are still using spreadsheets to try to manage when
I believe it.
And that's leading to the outages.
I believe. And domain registrations too. Every now and then we see somebody screw that up and forget to re-register a domain name. It's amazing to me, and they'll be like Fortune 500 companies sometimes too.
But the thing that's really changing here is the speed at which everything is going to have to be updated. When you're dealing with something that's over a year, okay. When you're dealing every 47 days, you cannot afford to do that manually anymore. You have to automate.
And it's I mean that's going to be in the middle of someone's vacation. That's going to be in the middle of somebody's going to have something better to do, and it's
funny that you say that. One of our customers had an outage on Christmas Eve. He's on the phone call bridge trying to troubleshoot while he's trying to read his daughter a Christmas story, and it turns out that it was an expired internal self-signed certificate that took a whole bunch of
self-signed cert.
So you're right on about that.
Managing PKI in-house is not for the faint-hearted.
No, you need automation, you need systems and governance and process to do that properly.
And then with all the updates to quantum algorithms, that's another thing we have to catalog and track as well, right?
Quantum is huge. So if you look at what's happening with PKI right now in a zoomed out lens, basically PKI is undergoing a renaissance. It's probably a once in 20 to 30 year event where all these different things are coming at PKI from external forces causing the change. So we talked about 47 days. That's from the folks who administer the public trust certificates. Chrome is doing another thing that's going to require people to reissue a bunch of certificates on this tiny little detail of how the certificate is allowed to be used. And then we've got quantum computing, where a quantum computer can do the amount of equations I think Google's Willow could do in less than 5 minutes, the amount of computations that it would take the fastest non-quantum computer the whole length of the universe to try to do, right? So when you turn that on today's algorithms, RSA and Diffie-Hellman, it's going to break them, right? And so we have to have, NIST has already put out, we already have quantum safe algorithms.
Yep.
But this, speaking of the pressures coming in on PKI, that's another thing that's going to make everybody have to touch every single PKI certificate.
They're all going to have to be regenerated.
And then another 47 days they'll have to all go over again, right?
Yeah.
So that wheel is spinning really quickly. Yeah. And so everybody needs to implement automation, put the policies in place. But at the same time, they're going to come out of this on the other side with everything that's safe from quantum computers and actually with spending less money, lowering costs
and less outages.
Automation, because the automation is there, and so either they'll directly save costs or they won't have to increase their team, but they'll increase the amount of stuff they're doing by 10 or 100 times.
So you're giving a talk here at Identiverse. Tell me a little bit about that, because I don't know much about it yet.
Great. So here we are at Identiverse, and my background is both in traditional identity and access management and PKI, so I'm trying to bring those two worlds together. And so the title of the talk is called Security Matchmaker, about IAM PKI coming together, and the subtitle is How PKI-based credentials and IAM can save the digital world. And that's a reference to the quantum threat that's coming up.
Right.
Because if you have experience with regular identity things, I would think, like, have you ever used a passkey?
Yeah.
And you take a QR, picture of the QR code. Well, that's public key cryptography. That's public-private key pairs behind it. Ever heard of or used like a YubiKey, like your second factor?
Yep.
That's a private key on there, and the public key is registered so you can sign in. Those are not quantum safe at this point. Those will have to be rotated into quantum safe. If you're a fan of single sign-on anywhere, where you sign in once and you don't have to keep entering your passwords, SAML, the security assertion markup language behind that, embedded in that are the key pairs for signing and encrypting those transactions. So everywhere. PKI is everywhere, and so the talk is going to be about, one, how embedded PKI is already today in the world of identity, two, how quantum is going to affect all of that, and three, how the two can work together in new ways to solve the problems of agentic AI and passwords and things like that. So.
But it seems like all those things are going to come together to just help people better manage their stuff anyway. You know, because I think any one of those three things, that's a can I'll kick down the road for another 10 years or 5 years or something like that. All three together, we got to get this taken care of.
Yeah.
Right.
It becomes an existential threat if it's not dealt with. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity, as we talked about. So. Yeah.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the conversation. I probably won't get to your talk. I'm going to be pretty busy tomorrow, but I hope it goes very well.
Thank you. And by the way, I forgot. The talk is at tomorrow, 4:35.
4:35.
Breakers J, for anyone who's listening. I think there's something in it for everyone, so I invite everyone to come see it.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. To find out more about DigiCert, you can visit securityweekly.com/DigiCertIDV. For all Identiverse 2025 coverage by CyberRisk Alliance, you can visit securityweekly.com/IDV. Thanks again, Ashley.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Identiverse 2025 for the day one wrap-up. It's a short day. We only did 2 interviews today and an intro. Jackie McGuire is back with me.
Hello.
How you doing, Jackie?
Thank you for having me back.
And yeah, we're going to wrap up. I don't think we learned a whole lot today, but I have a long list of stuff I need to look up.
Yes, yeah.
I've literally been taking notes here, and there's acronyms I need to look up. There's ideas, concepts I need to look up.
Yeah.
I don't know what shifting towards user-controlled identity models means. So I think to survive tomorrow, I need to brush up on my identity knowledge.
There is a product marketing manager out there who is so salty that you don't know what that means, because that is literally the crux of their entire performance review.
Yeah, they've written so many blog posts on it.
Yeah, you know, I think it's one of the hard things for us, especially hosting.
I'm sure their SEO is great.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and they're going to create a new acronym. And that's what everybody wants to do with their life, right? They're going to work with their analyst of choice, and they're going to create more letters for the alphabet soup, and everybody's going to get a bonus.
I now have to go look up and spend my time learning and understanding.
Yeah, you know, a nurse on my flight here today jokingly said, you know, there's a couple different cybersecurity conferences going on in Vegas, so, because it was a couple older couples, they were a little tipsy already. And I said, so just don't connect to any random Wi-Fi networks, no matter whether they're the name of your hotel or not. And the lady was asking me, you know, like...
They're not that kind of conference.
Yeah, she's like, how do you know? And I was like, oh, I do cybersecurity. Yeah. And she's like, really? She's like, can I do cybersecurity? And I was like, well, what do you do now? And she said, I'm a nurse. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I actually wrote this
You already understand some of the key concepts.
Yeah,
you
know
HIPAA rule, you already know a lot.
Yeah, no, right? And like the acronyms. The ability to memorize so many different acronyms, and then like responding to different incidents in nursing. Yeah, it's all following policies and procedures and playbooks. And if you can handle a code blue, you'll probably be okay with like a severe security incident that when it's not actually life and death.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I think it was just interesting talking to her, because she was like, you know, I feel like there's so much to learn, and I'm like, yeah, but you're in an industry where that's the case as well. But it's always one of the hard trade-offs for us at these things is, you know, we only get to go to a couple sessions if we're lucky, because we have work to do, and like trying to choose which things to go learn and which things are going to be impactful is not easy.
It's an interesting career, because people coming in now, like I was a generalist both by choice, but also it made the most sense.
Yeah.
Because back when I started, there weren't that many roles in cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And so you could literally do all the things in cybersecurity. Now it's spread out so much, and CISOs have more and more stuff to worry about. It's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like even just, this is an identity-focused conference, and there are so many talk tracks, so many things going on at once. I imagine some of the people out here in the expo right now still haven't decided what they're going to go listen to tomorrow, what talks they're going to, if they're even going to sit in talks.
Yeah.
Like a lot of conferences, I got to a certain point, I would just spend my time meeting up with people. Mm-hmm. You know, like what's my next career role?
Yeah.
Like, you know, am I looking to move into a role with more responsibility? Do I want to leave the enterprise side and go to a vendor?
Yeah.
Do I want to be an industry analyst? I didn't even know industry analyst was an option until I saw on Twitter a job posting for it from Wendy Nather. And, you know, next thing I know, I'm making a career pivot into...
I have to credit Justin Lamb with that for me. I posted on LinkedIn years ago. I was like, hey, I have this really weird background of finance and business and music business and data science. What do I do with this? And he was like, you become an industry analyst.
I found out we're connected through Justin Lamb because I chose, when I went to lead 451 Research, Scott said, fine. Scott Crawford, the research director over there.
Love you, Scott.
Said, okay, that's fine, but please help me find your replacement. And so my first choice was Fernando Montenegro. And Fernando Montenegro selected Justin Lamb as his replacement, I think.
Yeah.
And then Justin knew you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And Fernando is also one of our
Small
favorites.
world.
Yes, yeah. Fernando's my favorite because he's always willing to sit next to me at the big group analyst briefings and kind of kiki and talk a little smack. And
Yeah.
But yeah, Justin is actually, geez, he and my husband have probably known each other for 30
really?
years, 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so they both played for the San Jose Seahawks, which
Oh,
is
really?
a semi-pro rugby team in San Jose. Yeah, and Justin is just like everybody's favorite person.
Yeah.
He's just such a good dude. And so my husband had known him, and that's how he saw my LinkedIn post in the first place, was through my husband. So very small world, given how big the Bay Area is. But yeah, and I agree. I got into the industry analyst role, and I was like, this is my thing. I can explain. And I went onto the vendor side, we spent some time on the dark side for a while to understand that part, but I would never have even known that career was an option had it not been for Justin. And it's one of the things that came up when I was at WeSys, talking to women in cybersecurity, is none of them knew a sales engineer was a thing. And some of them were like, I don't want to write code 8 hours a day. I like people. And I'm like, be a sales engineer. You'll make more money. And they were like, what's that?
You have to know that's an option.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, how do you figure out what to do? We were just talking about this before we started this, is like, at these conferences, how do you choose your own adventure in the right way? So that you don't just walk away with a bag full of crap that you're either going to give to your kids to break or throw in the garbage. Because that's usually what you end up with.
I mean,
here.
networking is so important. I mean, that's how, it's one of my mentors is the one that talked me to get into getting on Twitter in the first place. Going to conferences, meeting other people, getting involved with community. So if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have seen this job posting. I wouldn't have met Wendy. I don't think I've ever gotten a job with a resume.
No.
It's always been through people I know, people I meet.
The last time I got a job with a resume was when I was 20 and got my job at Fidelity.
Right, yeah, when I was much younger, maybe.
Yeah. But, the way I see it, and we were talking about this a little before we started filming, is there's kind of 3 tracks I see at each conference, right? There's what's personally interesting to me. So I always think that, I'm autistic, so I have a special interest at all times. I have many special interests to hyper-focus on at all times. So, you can choose your conference adventure where you pick the stuff that's interesting to you and go to those sessions, because you're going to get the most out of those sessions because you're actually interested in them. I think there's kind of the middle of the road where you go to sessions applicable to your current role, but more focused on where you're trying to go, what the next role looks like.
Yeah.
If your employer's paying for you to go to a conference, I think one of the great things you can do is try to hit at least 1 or 2 sessions that you can really bring something back from to apply to your employer. So I think you just kind of have to find the mix of those 3 things, that you make it out of the end of the conference with as much retained information as possible, which is hard.
I imagine some people, in order to go to a conference, probably have to do a write-up when they get back, right? Or expected to. Here's what I learned, here's, kind of debrief the rest of the team that didn't get to go to the conference, right? So,
or if you want to keep being able to go to conferences when everybody else's budgets get cut, even if you're not required, that is a phenomenal thing for you to use your time for when you get back to the office, is give everybody 5 important things I learned and show that it was worth your time.
But you can probably combine many of those things, right? You can do a little bit of each at least. But yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about, this is, I think, the first conference I've been to since the pandemic or since ChatGPT, where AI is not plastered all over everything. AI is here. It is. I walked around the expo earlier. We do see vendors mentioning AI, but it's not the most important thing in identity. In identity, it's still a bit of a mess. Observability is an issue. AI is actually going to create more identity issues than it solves. That seems very clear with MCP and non-human identities. So it's very interesting to come to a conference where AI is just the next problem to be solved, not the savior of everything. Right?
We were just talking to Todd at ESG, and he was saying, people probably aren't really going to care about security for AI and agents until there's demonstrable harm.
Oh, yeah.
Because really everybody's just really chasing demonstrable ROI right now. And so somebody's going to go too far with that, trying to tie whatever their agents are doing to making more money, and then that'll be an issue, right?
It's a recipe, right? Like the same ingredients go into cauldron every time a new technology comes out. A bunch of YOLO engineers. I mean, I'm not being fair. Like, it's exciting stuff. They want to play with it. They want to share their work on GitHub. I can't blame them for that. Maybe even, they have a note in the README that says, this is not the secure way to do it. Don't do it like this in production. But still, people are going to take it. There's no HTTPS. We go absolutely back to the late 90s, Wild West of technology. We forget all the lessons that we've learned, and we just deploy stuff, and maybe we tell ourselves, oh yeah, I'll do proper access control and get certificates for things and like make everything proper if it works. Because you don't even know if it's going to work. Maybe it's garbage. Maybe everybody hates it.
Yeah.
But some percentage of those companies will deploy things insecurely, and it's going to be a mess. And we're already seeing some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to give credit to some of those young, eager engineers, what I would have thought was okay to do with data 15 years ago, and I'm not saying technologically 15 years ago, I'm saying when I was a much younger version of myself. Sometimes I think until you really grow up in the world and experience enough systemic risk and things going wrong and a ripple effect, you just really, I don't know that if you're not hyper paranoid when you're a young engineer, you can really conceive of how left things can go how quickly.
And we're both parents, so I can't say how much having kids kind of creates that effect. Like, you look at risk differently once you have kids.
Yeah, and the kind of like, and also having to teach your kids about risk, the systemic nature of it. Absolutely. And so I think, I generally think most people make the poor decisions they make out of ignorance, not malice. And so when if I had found some great new way to generate 10x revenue when I was a salesperson at Radio Shack, I probably would have been doing all kinds of unethical stuff to sell more cell phones when I was 18, right? So, I think it starts with the best of intentions, but to your point, it's like, this will work for now, and then all of a sudden you've got revenue coming in based on that thing, and it's just implemented without the proper controls in place because everybody got so excited about revenue that nobody looked at risk. Woo! Had a hot mic here. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but we got a hot mic.
What's the?
Tyson got the SNL reference.
Yeah, I'm looking right at the guy. He's not having a good time over there. What swag should you take home? Should you take home any swag? I'm at the point in my life where, if it's not a Yeti mug that will last me 20 years, I don't want it. Maybe if the t-shirt's really soft, but everything else is trash. To me, everything else is 2 weeks away from a landfill.
Yeah, I try to take as little as possible home now. I do always pick up backpacks just because I live in Tucson and we have a lot of reservations around my town where they always need school supplies. So I pick up blank notebooks, backpacks, pens.
It is the exterior of the care package.
Yeah, exactly. So I generally, like at RSA, I took like 10 backpacks home from RSA to donate. So I think about things you can give back to the community, because one of the horrific things I noticed when I first started doing trade shows is a lot of these companies just throw away whatever's left over. So if you've got extra room and you can take 20 t-shirts home and give them to Goodwill, maybe all those people homeless in the park with your t-shirts on aren't the best advertising, but neither is wasteful marketing. So,
and I think my first, I'd never been to Black Hat or RSA before becoming an industry analyst. Mm-hmm. So, and that was 2013, I think, was my first RSA. And after over a decade, I feel like I've seen the swag, a lot more thought put into it. I feel like there's a lot less disposable stuff, frivolous stuff, and a lot more thought towards things that are practical.
Yeah.
Like I see a lot of screen cleaners out there, right? Stuff that just becomes part of your kit that you take in your backpack with you. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to think that's getting better, right? Like,
Yeah.
I joined. Booth babes were still a thing when I joined. When I started coming to conferences, we didn't.
People,
we
people
didn't,
don't still mistake you for one? People think I'm one all the time. They don't think you're a booth babe?
with the long hair. With the long hair,
Yeah.
I do look like I mean, I'm on camera right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was shocked that people would not think that you're a booth babe.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like scantily dressed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like that didn't really hit the fan until maybe 2015, 2016, and then it went into the policy of the show. Like, you bring any of that to the conference, we shut down your booth. And I saw it happen at Black Hat.
Somebody moved theirs to an after-hours event.
Somebody tweeted. Somebody took a picture and tweeted.
Nice.
Booth babes. That booth was done.
Well, the good
within an
news
hour.
is last year they put lampshades on them and sent them to a bar
Oh, my
outside the
goodness.
conference. So. No, I mean, I want to say, because I tell people this all the time, cybersecurity is one of the industries, is the industry that I have worked in where I have felt the safest as a woman, and I want to reiterate that as much as I can. I have had men in security proactively intervene on my behalf when other men are behaving badly, which almost never happened in finance. So I do want to, we make jokes. I do think when sales and marketing get involved, sometimes things go sideways, but I tend to hang out with most of the keyboard nerds.
Yeah.
And those people, I have never felt
people.
safer than in large groups of security nerds, even when they're all men. So we joke, but I do want to make it very clear that of all of the industries I've worked in, this is one of the ones that is a good one. I feel respected almost all of the time. I feel safe. The number of I'm also getting older, so maybe the number of unpleasant incidents I've had have been so much lower than the other industries I've worked in that I want to make sure I point out that we're being mostly facetious and that security has done a much better job than other industries of cracking down on those things.
Almost all of the time.
Almost all of the time.
Still work to do.
Yeah, there is. And like I said, sometimes when sales comes in, it gets a little hairy. But yes, I do want to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all for us here today. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Tune back in. We do have a day 2 live stream, and that's when we're doing most of the interviews. So be sure to tune in for that. Be going on all day. When do we start tomorrow, Tyson? What time? 9 a.m. Pacific. And we don't have an opener. We're just going to jump straight into the interviews. So we'll see you at 9.